So this is part 2 of the 12 stages of awakening. In the first video, I walked pretty quickly through the first 6 stages and then tiptoed very briefly into stage 7, which is the emergence of non-duality. So in this video, I want to pause here for a second and settle into non-duality and what that means in our life experience. One of the ways to talk about non-duality is that in the first stages of life, we feel like there's something to achieve. We feel like there's something to be obtained by working towards something. We feel like we need to grow. We feel like we need to change. We feel like through our actions we are creating something. There are many versions of this impulse, but we feel like there is a small I which is separate, and therefore this I can create something because there is a doing. We have a perception that we are the doer. This is one of those boundaries that dissolves as we enter stage 7. So stage 7 through 12 is, from this map, half of the experience of humanity. And it is in this place of unity, of non-duality. So it's even, the map itself is also a joke, because the map itself is telling us that the map is all just one. And yet we have this variety of experience within the kaleidoscope of life that we can appreciate and enjoy and revel in each nuance of the experience. This is the meaning behind the map I create that has the rainbow of colors in the middle. So we are the rainbow. We are all the light. And truly, when all those colors come together in unity, we just have the brilliance of complete white light. And yet we love the rainbow. We revel in the separation. We revel in the clarity of the blues versus the reds and yellows and purples and greens and all the other nuance that we achieve and feel in this life through our perception, even though we know on a deeper level that it's all just one. So when we're experiencing life through the lens of 1 to 6, we are experiencing life as a linearity. Now, when I say linearity, I actually don't mean a straight line. I mean our perception is that we go step by step on a path, right? The deeper reality is that many of us, most of us, probably all of us, have the experience that life is really complicated and messy. So it could be like a bowl of noodles, and where our life is one of the noodles, our life path is one of those noodles, and we're twisting around in the bottom of the bowl in darkness, wrapped around with all the other noodles that are smashing us down in the bowl. And we can't really tell that we're going to pop out pretty soon farther down the bowl into the light in a new place, right? And the truth is, it's not really linear from another perspective as well. So when we're at stage 1, which by definition is that we don't acknowledge there's anything else outside of our five senses, outside of our small perception, outside of our brain's knowledge, moment to moment. When we're in that phase, there's nowhere really to go because we don't acknowledge there's anything else. As we expand in on the path into stage 2, where we realize there's more, and as we start walking on the path in stage 3, we're expanding our bubble, we're expanding our awareness around what's possible. We're expanding our awareness of who we are in the world. And so that gives us more movement around the stages. So at any given time, the way I like to think about it is that we might be in any given moment in time, we have a grounding in a particular stage. So we have a grounding where that's our gravity, where our center of energy will come back to that at rest, let's say. But that we can be then moving around in a cloud in all directions into other experiences of life. So let me give an example as we move into, so I just took us from stage 1, which is unconsciously keeping ourselves small by not recognizing anything greater. Stage 2, we realize there's more. Stage 3, we start taking action on the path. We start developing our connection with spirit. We start opening up to the possibility that there's more. We start meditating. We start reading books on spirituality. We start talking to our friends around the path. We start realizing that the viewpoints we held previously might not be fully true, etc. Stage 4 is this powerful boundary within which we find self-love through this work. Right? So stage 3, we're striving, but still have a lot of fears and doubts that are controlling the predominance of our actions. So the majority of our actions in stage 3 are driven by our fears, our doubts, our thinking processes, which keep us small. Stage 4, we're flipping where then, 50.0001% or more is guided by the intuition of our hearts. But that still means that there's still this almost half, perhaps, of our experience, which is still full of those doubts and fears and behaviors which are not fully aligned with our highest self from one perspective, right? So moving into stage 4 doesn't mean that we're entirely, completely healed and don't have any fears or doubts and don't behave in those ways. No, not at all. Through much of the process to go, we still can and do need to cycle back to stage 3, for example, to continue to heal, to continue to unravel, to continue to expand our sense of self, heal those parts of us that we keep in darkness, excavate those parts of us that are holding us back, release those knots of separation, right? Those parts of us that we keep in shame, hidden from others, release those over time as we move through the stages, right? Again, this is from the perspective of 1 to 6, where we're actually moving linearly through the stages. So as we go to stage 4 and 5, right? 5, then we're acting powerfully in the world through that place of love from our heart center. But still, we still have unhealed parts of ourselves that will continue to be released. I'll get into this later, but this is where a lot of spirituality goes wrong. This is where a lot of cults are created. This is where a lot of abuse occurs, because people often in stage 5 form a school and gain followers based on their charisma and power in the world, because they're being able to pull through a lot of spiritual energy, but they're still guiding it, at least partially, from this place of ego, from this place of need, from this place of self-gratification for the small self, etc. And that leads to, again, cults, abusive behavior, manipulation in the name of spirituality, self-gratification in all kinds of ways, etc. So that's an example of people who are moving very powerfully along the spiritual path, not realizing that, and being driven by these unhealed parts of themselves in a really hurtful way. Stage 6 is really about, again, touching the vastness of energy that is just beyond our reach. Right? Stage 6 is you're on the top of the mountain, reaching into and feeling the beauty of non duality, receiving the wisdom of the unity, but still it's just right there, right? In stage 6, that unity is right there. I can see it and I can tell you about it, but it's still just right there. Let me tell you about what I just saw. Right? That would be sort of a caricature of stage 6. When we drop into stage 7, for the first time, we realize that all of that is a mirage. That all of that is not based on the foundation of who we are. But here's the joke as well, is that that's still, even at 7, we're not entirely healed. And by healed, I mean completely merged with that unity consciousness. By 7, we're just mostly in union with that consciousness. Remember, in this model, there's still half of the cycle to go. There's more unity to be experienced. And that's the joke of this, right? Because again, I'll say this again, it's all one thing. So there's nowhere to go, right? This is this interesting, reductive way to talk about the experience to help us move through it, when in reality, we're already all of it. But it is our realization that we're not, which keeps us separate. And that's still, and this is what's really nuanced, even at 7 and beyond, we enter non-duality fully and powerfully in 7. One way to talk about it is that it takes a while for our energy system in our bodies to align with the vastness of experience that we now live in. So it's like we graduated, this is from one small perspective, we graduated from swimming in the kiddie pool all the way out to the middle of the ocean. And we realize that we're in the middle of the ocean, but initially we might still dog paddle in a little circle as if we were in the kiddie pool. It's kind of like that. It's also nothing like that, but it's kind of like that, right? Initially at stage 7, we're still dog paddling in a little circle because we're still not integrated with the fullness of the unity, even though we fully realize that now we are the unity and not trapped in the kiddie pool, right? The kiddie pool, really, in this analogy, was floating in the middle of the ocean, and we just sort of pop out of the kiddie pool, or maybe the kiddie pool, the bottom falls away, and that's stage 7. But then we still sort of stay inside the ring a little bit. We know there's the vastness, but we don't have a way to navigate that yet when we're in stage 7. Again, we can also reach stage 7 from lower stages, quote, lower stages, right? So we can reach stage 7 when we're in stage 1, 2, or 3. We can pop up into 7 and receive the knowledge of the wisdom of everything. In a simple way, there's a couple of ways that it occurs. In reality, there's an infinite number of ways it can occur. But in simple terms, in Western psychology, it's called like a psychotic break, right? So people can just be going about their business, and then for some reason they have a psychotic break, and their consciousness can expand rapidly into 7 and beyond. There are cases where then that is able to be integrated, and people stay there and live their lives from 7 and beyond. But often, that's too much of a disassociation, and our body-mind complex rejects that and pushes us back down into stage 1, 2, or 3, because we can't integrate and accept the vastness of that truth. Even though that is the truth, even if we might realize that, our body-mind complex, if we're not ready for it, if we don't have a foundation of energetic work, um, what happens is that our body mind energy complex will reject the vastness of seven and beyond and push us back down. People who have those experiences sometimes go on to be great artists or writers, right? Other times in our Western culture, we'll put them away in an institution and say they were crazy because they start talking about themselves being God or some other thing. And if it's not in an integrated fashion, it can feel disassociative and it can be difficult. As I mentioned before, we can also pop into stage seven and beyond very easily through plant medicines and psychedelics of various kinds. In a simple way, from this context, one of the things that those substances do for us is that they have a manner of breaking down the barriers between these 12 stages. From the context of this map, that's one of the things they do, is that they lower the guardrails, they lower the barriers between the stages. And so then our consciousness is able to flow through all of the stages with ease and experience all kinds of realms of awareness and consciousness and vastness of this universe. If we're partaking these substances in a context of care, in a container of understanding and wisdom, and with a perspective of expansion, we can often gain a huge amount of healing from these experiences, right? We can gain directionality and focus and clarity because we've been shown a deeper, wider version of ourselves. So that's the positive version of those experiences. And I will have a whole nother discussion or multiple discussions around this part of the journey using psychedelics, using plant medicines, and how it relates to this map. So this is just a very quick introduction to these ideas. Again, if we don't have the context, if we don't feel safe on these journeys, it's easy to be scared within the vastness of our experience. It's easy to, when we experience the fullness of the light of God through the vastness of the universe, it's easy to then see our small selves and feel extremely bad. We can feel our pain magnified times 1,000. We can feel our smallness magnified by 1,000,000 because we see the insignificance of ourselves in this way. And if we don't have context to hold the vastness, it can be extremely traumatic. And this is where a lot of the crying, the fear, the separation, a pullback and a rejection of the vastness, really often occurs. And that's okay. This is part of the process, right? By shining light on that, by shining light on who we are at any moment, we always have the opportunity to open up into what's more. In the short time scale of a lifetime, sometimes those experiences do cause people to pull back away from spirituality out of the fear of the vastness of that in various ways. Again, we'll talk about this more in future videos. We can also reach 7 through spiritual practices, through yogic practices, through breath work, through mantra, etc., through ritual in all kinds of ways, through fasting, right, through using our body. So there's many, many physical pathways to reaching higher states of consciousness, many, 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 that have been developed across time, across all cultures, right? Going into a sweat lodge, right, is one of the ways, etc. Many, many ways across all cultures, across all time. And those allow us to, all these methods allow us to, from wherever we are at these, quote, lower stages that are more limited consciousness, expand our mind, expand our consciousness, our awareness outside of the confines of the smallness of the level that we're at, to experience the vastness of non-duality. at stage 7 and beyond. Again, these practices are extremely valuable because they show us the truth. They show us the directionality of our true self. And they can actually, from this perspective, these practices can actually build up our energy bodies. They can build up our pathways, open up our channels and awareness, and prepare our mind-body energy system to receive the fullness of non-duality completely. So it's really common for spiritual practices, spiritual path traditions to build in periodic rituals of expansion that are increasing in intensity so that when people do naturally relax into the non-duality, that they can have a higher chance of staying there organically. Right? So what is required from this perspective, right? When we're still on 1 to 6, we think we're achieving something and we're changing something by falling into non-duality at 7, right? We have that perspective from the smallness of separation of 1 to 6. From the perspective of 1 to 6, what is required to move into 7? And this is where it gets really fascinating, because moving from stage 6 to 7 is not about doing anything. It's about relaxing into everything. And so there's this dichotomy of how is relaxing into everything not doing something, right? Because if you're doing it, if there's a doer, the doer will keep the self small and not allow the unity. So over time, there are a lot of guiding perspectives that allow people to feel the call towards openness, right? And there are many, many versions of these. The most powerful version of our guidepost is the feeling of love. Is the feeling of love. In my work as an Akashic reader and medium and channel, I've been shown very clearly that love is the experience we have in humanity, and the word we use in English for this experience of connection with everything. So when we say, I'm in love with somebody, right, that experience is the experience that we have when we're in love with someone is the one of connection with another being, and that connection opening up the world of possibility with connection with the universe, right? That's one way to talk about that experience. But love is more universal than that. The love we feel is the truth of essence and connection with everything, right? And the love comes through our heart mind, our heart center, which is not our physical heart, but the energy here, which comes through this part of our body. It's deeply connected with our intuition. Intuition, one way to speak about intuition, is an alignment of our being and knowing with our heart. Because the heart wisdom is the wisdom of the energy of the universe, which is everything. And it will always guide us towards truth, right? So whenever we're feeling fear or separateness, number one, it's okay simply to be with that fear and separateness, because that also is true and real. So there's nothing to change, nothing to separate, nothing to do around that except for simply be. And when we have the ability within that fear and separateness and smallness to have some awareness around it, we can naturally drop into the experience of love of those emotions, of those experiences, and that will orient us towards the expansion into stage 7. Whenever we feel separate, we can, at some point, realize the truth that we're actually whole, and that will orient us towards the expansion into stage 7. When we feel disjointed and separate, we can realize that's an experience of wholeness. When we're feeling scarcity, which is some experience of separateness and smallness, I don't have enough, we can realize that actually we're in the universe as a single entity of wholeness. And so what is there possibly to need or want, because we are and have everything, right? When we're feeling anger, we can realize that that's one version of that anger is a desire for connection and being seen, right? We can drop into our heart center. Now there, again, I want to clarify, I'm speaking really simply from a certain perspective. All of these practices, as we move through the stages, there's many, many amazing tools and resources and perspectives and healing modalities that I recommend deeply to be able to have the spaciousness to hold all of that in each moment. So for me and everyone I know, this has been a process, and this has been a process of many tools, many experiences, many false starts, much help needed from many people, to allow us to feel the openness that allows us to move forward. This is not, for most of us, some people it is true. Some people, the stories go, can just one day wake up and feel the spacious connection with the universe, and that's that, and they walk off and have a different life. Wonderful. If that's you, I salute you. And for the rest of us, again, when we're in 1 through 6, it definitely feels like a journey. It feels like a slog. It feels like we're getting somewhere, we're doing something, we're changing, and that's okay, because that is true within the perspective that we're in at that time. Once again, back to 7, when we drop into 7, there's nothing to hold on to. When we drop into 7, there's nothing to cling to. There's no truth. There's no right or wrong. There's no preference. When we drop into 7, we realize deeply how neutral the universe is. And how deeply there is the entire range of experience open to us as humans. So there is the entire range of experience in every possible way, in every possible permutation. And we're here on earth, and our souls are choosing to be here on earth to experience all of that, right? Our souls choose to come to earth, I'm shown as a medium and channel. Our souls choose to come to earth to feel the separation, so that they can then experience the reuniting with truth, with everything, with the all, right? When our souls are in other states of being, when our souls are connected to the entirety of the universe, well, in that stage of light and connection with everything, we can't experience everything because we already are everything, right? We experience things by separating and then coming into them, right? It's like tasting a really beautiful dish. The first bite is the most exquisite, and as we eat more and more bites, we become numb to that experience because it's already a part of us. It's the same. So our souls come to earth, I've been shown, to separate so that we can reemerge in the whole. And that's what this cycle is about. So stage 7 is realizing the wholeness of everything, but it's still unformed. So 7 can be destabilizing. Stage 7 can be empty and vast. And it can also be full and bright and intense. And both of those are the same. Those are the yin and the yang of the fullness and the emptiness, which are also the emptiness and the fullness of everything. But we're experiencing them initially because we've had a dualistic perspective for all of our life up until those moments of connection, truly landing from our grounded center in 7. It takes us a while to integrate that those are the same. We're in it because we have built up enough spacious vastness in our energy, mind-body complex to accept the oneness with everything. But when we first enter 7, we're not able to initially integrate all that. And so 7 is about the process of integrating from this perspective, the fullness of the emptiness and the emptiness of the fullness, the yin and the yang of experience. And we're in all of it. In 7, we are in non-duality, but we're still, and this is what's really nuanced, and it's going to be misinterpreted easily from the perspective of 1 to 6, right? So this is trying to explain a non-dual perspective in a dual language. There's a perception of that there's one or the other in 7, and then over time that can come together into a whole, and that leads us into stage 8, where we can see the fabric and pattern of the everything. Stage 8. So stage 7 is also the first time where we really deeply experience timelessness, because everything is just here, right? When everything is absolutely in non-duality, well, then how can there be time? Because if there's one thing, non-dual, everything is one, then everything is already here. And if everything is already here, then everything is already now. Everything that ever was and everything that ever will be is right here and right now. So initially in 7, just as our concept of yin and yang and full and empty and the duality of experience on all gradients of experience in earth, takes us a while to integrate those perceptions from this new way of holistic experience. The interesting thing about 7 and beyond is that we still experience everything as separate in its wholeness. And we can still experience the individuality within the unity. And there's no dichotomy in that when we're holding the perspective of non-duality. When we're holding the experience, it's not a perspective. When we're basking in the totality of non-duality of 7 and beyond, it's not a dichotomy. There's no conundrum in experiencing the separation of the unity, because our energy system acknowledges that we need to, on earth, in our body, feel every moment to move through it while we're holding the whole. And at the same time, like for me, as I moved through that, the experience I had was that time was like silly putty. That was the way I experienced it. There are many other forms of the ways people can talk about that, right? Again, trying to translate non-dual experience into duality, into dualistic language is an interpretation. There's a filter. So, but the best way I can talk about it from my experience is time became like silly putty, where, especially at first, it was incredibly fun and freeing and liberating to be able to simultaneously know that because I have a body, I am moving through linear time as described by clocks and watches and everything on earth, and day and night and the seasons, etc., and simultaneously experience that I could move through that freely without constraint, that I could experience the future and the past as now, as this malleable matrix of truth, while still having a body moving through time. So I'll leave that there for now. As we continue through these stages, and I will describe them now, they become increasingly esoteric from the perspective of 1 to 6. So I'm going to put some words to them now, again with the caveat that these words I'm using will be simplistic and, frankly, in some ways misleading, but they are my shorthand of the moment for these experiences of humanity. And I will, again, loop back with all of these topics in more detail in the future. Again, I just want to clarify one more time that this is all a shorthand for a touch point of these stages of truth. These words are not trying to encapsulate the totality of these higher experiences anyway, because that is not what they're about, right? These stages of experience are about increased inclusivity and expansion and refinement of the experience of this unity, right? So stage 8 is the first experience of non-duality where we're actually stabilized in a certain way. So stage 7, we are still floating. Again, stage 7 is often called the dark night of the soul, right? So this is a period of, it's interesting because we know and experience that we're in the deepest, vast state of connection that we've ever been, and yet it can also feel at times separate and disassociated because it's so open. We can't receive all of it, right? So from one perspective, moving into from 7 to 8 is like we're in this vast room and it feels, the lights are so bright, right? The non-duality, the awareness, the wholeness, the vastness of everything is so bright that it's hard to see. We can't see the furniture. We can't, we're sort of walking around stumbling into things, and it's amazing, but we're also like, wow, I don't really know the landscape, right? The movement into stage 8 from this perspective is one of like our eyes adjusting to the brightness, to the vastness, to the scope of this non-duality, and then being able to walk around the room and see the furniture for the first time, right? So 8 is settling into the structure of our environment in this new and deep way, right? And 8 is, again, the first place within non-duality within which we're, quote, stabilized, right? 7, as I said, it's not uncommon for people to pop into 7 through various means and then spend a bit of time there and then pop back down. Again, there's no directionality. There's no good or bad here. It's just a journey. It's just an experience. It's all one thing. Speaking in this way, it's not uncommon for people to spend some time in 7 and then pop back down to through 6, and then they land in 5, right? Because we don't stabilize in 6 very easily. Again, the analogy of 6 is sort of tiptoeing on top of a mountain, reaching up into the void. That would be 6. So 5 is the place of grounded power, and it's very stable, very comfortable, very powerful. The other reason we drop back down to 5 is that in 7 we realize that we have no power, that there's nothing, because there's no we, there's no I, there's no individual energy body to hold the power at 7. Now that's funny because we still have individual energy bodies, but we realize at 7 and beyond that they're not ours. There's nothing to hold. There's nothing to need. There's no need to hold anything, because actually the more we release it and expand it, the bigger it gets, because it's everything. The bigger it gets because it's already everything, so it's already as big as it can get. It's only the smallness of our need to be individual that keeps us powerful, right? So for people who are really addicted to the power of 5, acting from our heart center, acting in the world, deeply aligned, deeply manifesting, 7 can feel like a letdown. 7 can feel like a joke if there isn't enough development to hold the vastness in a way that can break apart that ego formation, right? 5 is a powerful stage of ego formation. My teacher used to talk about the karmic tigers that would come and eat you at 5, right? And that was an analogy for being trapped by our ego, being trapped by the power attached to the ego that was still there, holding us back into the traps of ourself. So people can spend a lot of time at 7 and then pop back down to 5. And this is really, really common, as I mentioned before. This is a very, very common way in which teachers teach because people at 5 like to, and that their role is, the appropriate role for 5 is to be out in the world, powerfully expressing your truth. At 7, people don't really very frequently want to talk about where they are. 7 is a stage in historical mythology that, the yogi, the seeker, would go to the cave in the Himalayas, because it's a time where things are very dynamically, confusingly open, and that can take some time to integrate. It's a time of deep, deep, deep integration on all levels of our being in a way that we thought was never possible. Even if we knew it was possible, it still doesn't remotely prepare us for what it actually is. Nothing in 1 to 6 can actually prepare us for the true experience of 7. And that even includes psychedelics, that even includes the plant medicines. They take us there, but they take us to 7 from the perspective of the stage that we were at. So we can experience the vastness, but we're grounded, if you will, we're tethered. We're filtering that experience through that stage of experience where we were. So we're experiencing it, but through rose-colored glasses, if you will, through a certain perspective, through a certain hue, filtered by our experience of still where we are, because we're tethered where we are in terms of our grounding state. When we're at 7, organically, there is no tether. There's no tether. This is why it's terrifying. This 7 can be terrifying in a way that is unlike anything else on earth. In fact, it's not, because it's not based on anything on earth at all, right? So all of the fears that we've ever experienced in 1 to 6 are based on this 3-dimensional experience of separateness, and we have fears around that. The fear of 7 is the reverse. It's, oh my goodness, none of that is real for me anymore. What do I do now? How do I live here when I'm not tethered by that? It's completely disassociating, again, if we don't have the grounding and the energy and the channels built up over time to be able to hold that and realize that we're safe. For me personally, I've been working with this 12-stage map for over 20 years, and this map was what allowed me, in my experience and my journey, to know I was safe. To know I was safe and to allow it to continue to occur. It meaning the experience of disassociation at 7 and just being held in the vastness. And that allowing allows us to adjust, and using the analogy I used earlier, allows us to see the furniture and see the ground in this place of brilliant light of everything. Once we ground in 8, there's no going back. Once we ground in 8, we live in non-duality the rest of our experience on earth in this lifetime. And I say that again with certainty, and also with a caveat that within this expansiveness of 8, where we are in non-duality and actually now for the first time can see the structure of the universe for the first time, and we can walk within the structure of nothing that is everything. We can walk on the ground of non-duality, knowing that we are the ground and we are the walker. We still have a body, we're still on earth. And so here's the thing, we still have our bodies that have our karmas, that have our traumas, that have our broken backs and our headaches and our daily experiences that we've set up for ourselves. So everything changes when we move into 7 and 8, and nothing changes, right? This is the wisdom of that old Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. We still need to drink the water, and we still need the wood to heat the fireplace and cook our food, right? We still need to take care of everything in day-to-day life, and not everything resolves instantly into some glowing ball of light, right? So we're at 8, and we never go back beyond the experience of non-duality, and we're still right where we were. We realize nothing changed at all. We realize we didn't achieve anything. We realize there's nothing to be done except for what's here. And some of what's here is, oh wow, there's still these parts of myself I still need to heal. There's still this relationship that is messy that I need to work on. There's still this part of my experience that needs to be attended to, right? There's this mythology in the Western world of like we achieve enlightenment and everything changes and we just sit there in this ball of light and everything is good and fine. And like from the perspective of 8, everything is good and fine because it is what it is, and we just laugh a lot at that perspective of, look at this crazy mess that's Earth. Like, look at this chaos that's all around. Wow. And, personally, like, wow, I created a lot of this. And here I am, like, sweeping up and, like, working on all of these things that I, like, scattered around myself thinking that they were important, right? And those, again, I can't stress enough, that includes difficulty, that includes pain, that includes trauma, that includes suffering. Yeah, and this is important. Non-duality doesn't preclude the experience of any of the emotions. So it includes the suffering. And at the same time, that suffering is glorious because we realize that's who we are. If there's going to be the rapture of everything, of the bliss of Ananda, if there's going to be the connection and love of the universe and union with God, which there is, within the realm of reality on this three-dimensional earth that we're on, there's also the pain of separation and smallness and traumas and fears and all the things that occur. And so this is the place where we actually hold the suffering, we hold the pain, we hold the troubles with such dear appreciation and love. But there's the part of us that is still on this earth that's still like, wow, but this is messy and difficult. And it doesn't make it any less messy and difficult in all the ways that it is, whatever our circumstance is. So the only thing that changes, which is nothing, but the only thing that changes is our perception from this perspective. Everything has changed because we are everything. Nothing has changed because we are simply right here and always were everything. And again, we can talk around this and it's much more even nuanced than that, right? These are, again, all just euphemisms for what this experience is. But the experience is everything and nothing all at once, and that includes the pain, that includes the suffering. Whatever was there before is still there. Nothing is magically shifted. Our relationship to it is shifted where we accept the pain and we love the suffering, not from a place of masochism, but from a place of tenderness and dearness and like enduring appreciation in a certain way. There's also like this sense of enduring wonder. Like, wow, look at all this. This is amazing. And then there's an embracing of like, well, where else can I explore? What else is there? Stage 9 is when we settle in beyond the room. So using this euphemism of like, stage 7, you're in this room, but it's lit so brightly with like blinding lights that you can't even see the furniture, for example, or the walls or anything. You're just sort of stumbling around in the vastness. That's one simple experience of 7. It could also be pitch black, right? So there's also the darkness of 7. Going through 7, like for me, I've had many, many experiences with depression earlier in my life. And when I was in 7, the confusing part of 7 for me was like, well, I feel depressed, but it's not sticky and dark and heavy like depression is. I don't want to crawl into my bedroom. I'm just in the world, but I still feel separate and it feels disassociated a certain bit, right? That's one small way of my experience of 7. 8, again, we can adjust and we can see the furniture in the room in this euphemism. 9 is like we can see actually the whole landscape of the universe. So 9, we actually start to experience and feel like, from the Taoist perspective, where this tradition came from, the five elements of the universe, right? So at 7, we know we're in the everything. At 8, we can sort of see the furniture around us and sort of the order of nature. By 9, we're actually experiencing the fundamental energies. We're in touch with the fundamental energies of the universe. So from the Taoist perspective, they call those the five elements, right? These are the five fundamental forces from that perspective of what the universe is. Beyond that, we're experiencing the infinite nuance of vibration in the universe. As a medium and channel, like what I do is I just tune my vibration to different levels of frequency, different levels of vibration, and then receive information from those levels, for example. The feeling of 9 is going from some sort of like primitive shortwave where you only have one or two channels, right? Where in the smaller eye might only have a few channels of experience. When you're at 9, you realize you have an infinite band that can talk to and connect with all of the humanity, all of the frequencies of the energies of the earth, all of the frequencies of the energies of the heavens and beyond, and beyond, and beyond, right? We have the insight and connection within our being with all the levels of the universe and their fundamental structures and vibrations and frequencies. That's 9. We're getting more and more esoteric here. So the words that I'm using are going to be increasingly a story. They're going to be increasingly a parable for what is true as I get beyond these stages. Stage 10 is the stage when you not only are aware of the structure of the universe, but you realize you actually are. And again, this is not truth. This is an experience and a story. I'm saying for simplicity. At 10, we realize we are in control of the entire structure of the universe across all time. We are able to move with and influence those elemental universal forces, which are everything, which are us, and we are fully in tune with that. Stage 11 is, in this map, in this perspective, in this 12-stage cycle, that final stage of union with everything, where we are truly, in the most fundamental sense, the master of the universe. We are in union with everything in the universe, and everything in the universe is fully integrated with us. And this is the last stage where we actually are still human while we're still everything. So this would be the archetype of stage 11 would be the sage in some cave somewhere, sort of levitating in full union with everything, but still able to speak. But doesn't need to eat. This is again a mythology, right? This is a mythology around to describe this level of energetic experience. Nourished entirely by the universe, levitating and maybe even time traveling, because they are all of those things and none of those things. And so then why not go anywhere and everywhere and be anything and everything, because here we are. Changing form at will, communicating across time, entering your dreams, creating miracles of all kinds. We can talk about miracles separately. Miracles are happening really in a powerful way since stage 4, because that's manifestation is another word for just talking about the miracles of creation of the universe. But at this stage, there is no limitation, right? There is, because there's still a human form, but it's a person in human form who is as merged with the universe as possible while still having a body. It's just a simple way to say it. Stage 12 is becoming everything so completely that we simply merge into everything. And some of the classical ways of talking about 12 would be a light body. These are these mythologies around these sages who were so completely merged with the universe that they left their body in a ball of light, and all that was left over was sort of hair and fingernails, right? We merge into everything so completely that we release any physicality of our bodies. In one sense, that could be called death. In another sense, it could be called the ultimate life. In another sense, it's nothing at all. It's just part of the cycle. And yeah, but still, 12 is the unity with everything, so much so that we even give up any pretense that we have a physical body that is meaningful to us. And again, as I mentioned earlier a few times in this video and in the one before it, when we are that everything, we realize the glory and beauty of separation, because it allows us to reconnect, and the sublime delight we have in separating to reconnect. And so then the cycle continues by choosing again, for many souls, by choosing again to have a human body so that we can repeat this experience of